Good morning. Protagoras day 10. There are many more to come. Here Protagoras brought an end to his long and magnificent display of eloquence. For a long time I gazed at him spellbound, eager to catch any further word that he might utter. So Protagoras was a Pythagorean. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. But so Plato had two great influences. Socrates and Pythagoras, which I might be pronounced wrong, but he was the shaman-like man who John talks about in episode 5, I think, the waking from the meaning crisis. And Protagoras was one of his greatest followers. So it is very appropriate that Socrates is portrayed as being deeply impressed by him, and I am quite sure there is no irony here. When I saw that he had really finished, I collected myself and said, turning to Hippocrates, "Son of Apollodorus, how grateful I am to you for inducing me to come here. To have heard what Protagoras has just said is something I value very highly. I used to think that it was by no human diligence that good men acquired their goodness, but now I am convinced. There is just one small thing holding me back, which Protagoras I know will easily explain, now that he has instructed us on so many points. It is true that if a man talked on these matters with any of our popular orators, he might possibly hear similar discourses from Pericles or some other proficient speaker. But if one asks any of them an additional question, like books they cannot either answer or ask a question on their own account." So ones who have speeches but don't really have knowledge or understanding. Ask them the smallest thing supplementary to what they have said, and like a gong which booms out when you strike it and goes on until you lay a hand on it, so our orators, at a tiny question, spin out a regular marathon of speech. Protagoras, on the other hand, though he is perfectly capable of long and splendid speeches, as we have seen, has also the faculty of answering a question briefly, and when he asks one himself, of waiting and listening to the answer. A rare accomplishment. I think that is indeed a rare accomplishment amongst teachers, the ability to wait and listen to the answer. Now then, Protagoras, there is just one small question left, your answer to which will give me all I want. You say that virtue is teachable. There is no one I would believe sooner than you. But there is one thing which took me by surprise in your speech, and I should like you to fill this gap in my mind. You said that Zeus bestowed on men justice and respect for their fellows, and again at several points in your discourse justice and self-control and holiness and the rest were mentioned, as if together they made up one thing, virtue. This is the point I want you to state for me with more precision. Is virtue a single whole, and are justice and self-control and holiness parts of it, or are these latter all names for one and the same thing? That is what I still want to know. Ooh, this is a very juicy question. When you participate in dialectic into dialogos, circling of virtue, it's almost always the conclusion that whichever virtue you are circling is the ultimate virtue connecting all of them. And of course, then once you've done it enough times, you realize that is not possible, that every virtue can be the ultimate virtue connecting all of them. But that does say something about the interconnectedness of all virtues. Is virtue a single whole? And are justice and self-control and holiness parts of it? Or are these latter all names for one and the same thing? This is what I still want to know. So when I was preparing for the second dialectic into Dialogos weekend, I read all of Plato because I was a bit overwhelmed the first time, so I wanted to be prepared. I would suggest to people, if you're going to do a dialectic circling weekend with dialectic, circling into Dialogos, I think it's the name now, then read Protagoras. It seems, I mean, maybe it's too soon for me to say, but this seems to be a good one to prepare you for it. Well, that is easy to answer, said he. Virtue is one, and the qualities you ask about are parts of it. That makes a lot of sense. To me, at least. Let's see what Socrates says. Do you mean, said I, see, I'm too eager to just accept whatever answer is given me. Socrates keeps asking questions, as is right. As the parts of a face are parts, mouth, nose, ears, and eyes, like the parts of the piece of gold, which do not differ from one another or from the whole except in size. In the first way, I should say, that is, they are in the relation of the parts of a face to the whole. Okay, so now what I'm thinking now, what popped in my mind, I wonder if Protagoras has these answers ready-made, or if they are actually practicing something into dialectic. But Socrates is actually drawing these answers from Protagoras, and he is stating what comes to him, although he's not necessarily quite sure that that is the ultimate answer. That could be interesting. Then do men so share in these parts of virtue that some have one and some others? Or must a man who possesses one of them possess them all? See, that would, to me, but I'm skipping ahead my eyes and it seems different, the answer. But to me, that would make sense. If virtue is one, if you possess one, you should possess all, at least in some degree. But Protagoras says, by no means. Many men are brave but unjust, and others are just but not wise. Okay, wisdom is a tricky one. Maybe wisdom is like the hair on the head. It takes longer to grow. You have to grow it. The others you can, it's there. It needs to be cultivated, yes, maybe, but not as desperately as the hair needs to grow. Well, that would be cool. I'm going to see wisdom as hair nowadays. That would make, for my own mythology, that would be really interesting. Are these also parts of wisdom, said I, of virtue, said I, sorry. Wisdom, I mean, and courage. Are these also parts of virtue, said I, wisdom, I mean, and courage? Most emphatically. Wisdom indeed is the greatest of the parts, and each of them is different from the, and each of them is different from the others? Yes. Wisdom indeed is the greatest of the parts. Has each also its own function? In a face, the eye is not like the ear, nor has it the same function, nor do the other parts resemble one another in function any more than in other respects. Is this how the parts of virtue differ, both in themselves and in their function? It must be so, I suppose, if the parable holds good. Yes, it is so, Socrates. Then no other part of virtue resembles knowledge or justice or courage or temperance or holiness. He agreed. So no other part of virtue resembles knowledge or justice, ἐπιστήμη probably, or courage or temperance or holiness. He agreed. So every virtue has a very peculiar appearance. Now let us consider together what sort of thing each is. First of all, is there such a thing as justice or not? I think there is, Socrates asked himself. So do I, he said. Well, if someone asks you and me, tell me, you two, this thing that you mentioned a moment ago, justice, is it itself just or unjust? I myself should answer that it was just. Which way would you vote? The same as you, he said. So I do get a different sense of Socrates in this dialogue than in the others. Maybe I'm mistaken. But what I'm almost getting here now is Socrates not so much trying to teach, but trying to teach himself. Not trying to teach his conversation partner, but trying to teach himself. Like when he poses the question, seeing what answer he self would give, and then testing that against Protagoras. Which is a great way, I think, if you can interact with a teacher like that. Like you have a question and then you provide the answer. Not in a sense to show off, I think that often happens as well. But to really see if you get it. And then see how it differs from your teacher's answer. Then we would both answer that justice is as such a nature as to be just. He agreed. Thus far, our reading for today. Have a beautiful day.